Welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. This show is an exploration of the unseen and unheard stories of adversity that shape the journeys of high performers. These conversations will help you better understand the mindset, habits, and behaviors that empower these exceptional leaders to endure the most challenging moments of their careers and emerge stronger than ever. Your hosts are Seager and Phillips. Let's dive in to more.
Welcome back to Masters of Resilience podcast. Super pumped to be joined by Ben Owen today. Ben is a leader whose life and work are a testament to transformation and purpose. From overcoming adversity in his own story to guiding others towards restoration, Ben has dedicated his life to helping people unlock their potential and break free from some of the most destructive cycles. His journey takes us deep into the themes of resilience, redemption, and the power of second chances. Lessons that resonate not just in personal life, but in leadership, business, and community. Ben's perspective reminds us that true resilience just isn't about pushing through. It's about turning pain into purpose and setbacks into service. Honored to have him on the show. Let's dive into more. Well, Ben, thanks so much for joining us on the Masters of Resilience podcast. We're thrilled to have you. And your story is one that, a fair amount of people do know, but there's a lot that don't. And I think your path in which you've traveled that leads to the work that you're doing now is something that this world and country deeply needs. So we'd love to start with a little bit of your background and story of how you've kind of gotten in the seat you're sitting in now. And we'll let the conversation evolve from there, but I know it'll be special.
Sure thing, Ryan. I appreciate you guys having me here very much, sharing your platform with me. So where did I come from? Man, we could talk the entire hour just about that. So I grew up all over the country. My dad was an Army Ranger stationed at Fort Campbell when I was born. I've lived in like 15 states. I had a lot of promise growing up. Like I was, gifted and looked like I was going to go on to cure cancer one day. But when I turned 12, 13, I discovered alcohol and started battling that at like a very, very young age. I was locked up for the first time at 15, and stayed there almost until I was 18, in and out of rehabs and institutions. Like I ended up getting sent to one of those places in Utah that they made the Netflix documentary.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
I deserve it. Like, I needed it. And then I ended up graduating high school with honors, went to Auburn on a math scholarship. The towers went down on September 11th. I decided to drop out and enlist in the Army. Didn't serve long at all. I was discharged due to injury before the summer of 2002 was over, and I had a major chip on my shoulder about that and just drank at it. Drinking progressed to more after a car wreck. By 2012, I was addicted to prescription pain pills. And then by early 2013, I was addicted to prescribed, but not to me, pain pills. And then by the end of 2013, I was on heroin. And like the 5 years leading up to that, or let's see, I guess 6, 7, 8 years leading up to that, like I'd gone on to get a job at a Fortune 500 and then left that, started a business, had a bunch of employees, had 5 kids, was married, outside looking in, had it all together. And then July of 2014, I got arrested for the first time for having a lot of my own drugs with my own guns. And that's typically frowned upon. And that kicked off like a 5-year, sometimes slow, sometimes really, really fast spiral towards rock bottom. I destroyed my marriage, lost my business, lost my home, got another marriage, got another home, built another business, and then burned it all to the ground again. Finally, I got tired of that cycle in 2019. I decided I was done and started doing, 12-step recovery, AA, NA. The woman who's my wife now, the second marriage, she got into recovery too. We were both out there together, homeless, hopeless, addicted on the streets of South Memphis. I mean, I burned everything to the ground. I lost all of it over and over and over again. In 2021, after we had left Memphis and restarted our businesses, we decided to start a nonprofit helping other vets battling opiate addiction. And we got pulled into the evacuation out of Afghanistan. And it just kicked off this weird series of very surreal events that built a circle of some pretty badass people around us. In 2022, we decided to start the nonprofit that you guys know, SPY. We Fight Monsters, which is like we're going into the worst neighborhoods in America, trying to fight the monsters of addiction, trafficking, and city violence. And it's been a wild ride since then. So I make my living in the data intelligence space. We sell basically phone data to the gun industry to market. And that's how I earn a living. But I spend all of my time, if you follow me on social media, you know this, I spend all my time in the trenches trying to fight, the war on drugs, the war on trafficking. And so ADD 1, 2, 3, man. I've got like weaponized ADHD. You're going to figure that out.
That's good.
Wow. Where to begin with that story?
Seriously.
Yeah, that's wild. So I think, I would say, pinpoint, bring us back to kind of when you're hitting that rock bottom point. I think people can resonate with that to varying degrees.
So rock bottom for me, I mean, there were, God, a million moments that any logical person looking at my story, or if you've read my book, there's probably 1,000 points in there where you're like, oh, he's about to hit rock bottom. I was not a logical, rational person. And I guess my ability to endure suffering is like really excessive. So there wasn't like this big culminating moment where Ben's just, I finally had enough. It was really anticlimactic. I woke up in an empty lot with no memory of the preceding really week. I was covered in blood. It was not my own. I didn't have a cut on my body. I have no idea what happened to this day, but I was just done. Like I was tired of living that life. I was tired of watching my friends die, tired of watching my friends go to prison. And I just made the decision right there in an empty lot in South Memphis that I was done. I was going back to the life I was always meant to live. And then that's exactly what I did. I don't want to say I'm unique among addicts, but unlike most addicts, like I had a very normal, successful life before heroin entered the picture. And so it was easier for me, I think, to remember, I went from small group leader at church and T-ball coach and Cub Scout master to being on the cover of Just Busted weekly in a matter of 6 months. The descent into madness was very, very quick. And I just got tired of suffering, man.
Yeah. So when you get to that point, what kind of steps did you take that kind of pushed you out of that rock bottom position?
Well, the first thing I did was just completely give up. I mean, and I don't mean that in like an apathetic way. I surrendered. Like I was done. I did not care what happened as long as I didn't get high. I knew I could rebuild my life. I ended up at 37 years old, having, been a very successful businessman, moving into my parents' basement. Like I went from employing 30 people to living on a couch in my parents' house and just started all the way over. The most important thing that I did was start going to AA and NA. I was in AA meetings against my will when I was 13, 14 years old. In hindsight, if you find yourself in a 12-step recovery meeting that you don't want to be in when you're 14, chances are pretty good. Like you should go ahead and hang it up right then. You're going to have a problem.
Right.
That's not a normal thing. So I do have to admit that solution was in front of me for 20 years. I just was not ready to submit to anybody's way but Ben's.
Wow.
Yeah. Ben, so much of that language is, I resonate with it in my own journey. And for me, a big component of that has been faith, has been a submission to a higher power, and I don't think we talk enough about that, but I think when you meet somebody that is surrendered, when you meet somebody that has come to the end of themselves.
100%, man.
It's a noticeable thing.
Yeah. So God can get to work. And, I'm careful talking about my faith too much because when you're dealing with people, let me rephrase that. I'm not careful talking about my faith. I have to be judicious about the win, right? When you're dealing with somebody that's coming off the street so that you've just pulled out of a trafficking environment or out of a trap house, they often will have a pretty serious resentment towards God. And until you get enough space between them and those traumatic events for them to understand that there is a loving creator out there, you actually push them in that direction if you try to have those conversations. So let's say this, I'm an incredibly strong Christian. I have no doubt it was my faith that kept me alive out there. And in fact, the last 6 months, Jess and I were on the streets. We used to say this foxhole prayer to God all the time, that if he would just get us out of hell together, we'd spend the rest of our lives coming back for everybody left behind. And boom, that's what we're on today. And then in 2021, we really started praying Isaiah 6:8, here am I, send me. I think I'm actually wearing that on a shirt.
I love that.
And perfect. And when we started praying that, man, that's one of those dangerous prayers, you just offer yourself up to God and tell him to do whatever he wants with you. And I think that's how we ended up where we're at now.
I can tell you're someone who has thought deeply about these things. So this is like forgive the almost impossible question, but you see the worst of humanity. How do you reconcile that with the loving God who has saved you?
Well, God gives us all free will. And there's no question about it. Over the last 4 years, I really have seen the absolute worst humanity has to offer. From genocide in Afghanistan to, murdering hostage taking gangs in Haiti and that's not even counting what we saw in the streets of Memphis and active addiction. And then today, I mean, you see some of the most horrific child abuse that you can ever fathom. And I do struggle with how to verbalize and reconcile a loving creator with the allowance of children suffering in the ways that we've seen children suffer. But you got to remember, man, we have free will and bad people do exist. And I think it's up to men like us to stand in that gap between bad men and the innocent anytime we can. And the Bible talks about it a lot, remember the orphans and the widows. I mean, it's all over the Bible. Like, we're called to stand in this gap between bad people and the innocent people they would like to harm. I don't think that the fact horrible things happen on this earth negates the presence of a creator in any way, though. I've never struggled with seeing what I've seen. I've never come to the conclusion, well, God must not be real. And the reason for that is, really simple. The redemption arc, not just of my story, but all of the stories we've been exposed to, there's no denying there is a God moving in that process everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And but I think too, especially the work that you're doing is it's so impactful. And I think sometimes it can seem so it's an insurmountable thing to overcome. And I think sometimes that can be a daunting thing of what action do I actually take to try to make a little bit of a difference. And clearly you guys are doing that, which is amazing to see. But how do you get you and your team to keep going when that, I think that need, just the more exposure you get, I assume it gets darker and darker some days.
It does, but it doesn't take but being able to see the scene you guys just saw unfold with my youngest daughter running in here. You see one guy or one mom that was homeless and bleeding in a gutter have that moment with her child. And you remember why you do this, Actually, I've got a good example because I was in a situation one time where I just felt like we were trying to pick specific drops of water out of a waterfall with an eyedropper, and it seemed so futile. It was during the aftermath of the tornadoes that hit Wynne, Arkansas a couple of years ago, and I had a human trafficking prosecutor from Arkansas there with us, and we were just out there trying to meet needs, see how we could help, work, recovery, get power back on, help people with the roofs, whatever we could do. Then he looked at me. He was like, dude, I've never seen anything like this in my life. Where do we even start? And I pointed at a house and I said, well, let's just start right there. And we did everything we could at that house. And then you move on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And that's the mentality you have to have sometimes when you're in a situation that's that overwhelming. But I will say that in the work we're running out on the streets, it doesn't really seem that overwhelming because there's a human being in every one of these circumstances out there. And being able to see the impact you're having on women and kids and trajectories, and then ultimately communities as a whole, it keeps the reason you're doing it top of mind. Do I think I'm going to win the war on drugs by myself? Absolutely not. Am I going to stop trafficking by myself? Absolutely not. If I had every resource that I could possibly dream of having, I'm still not going to stop it. But to every single little girl that we have impacted, to every single family we've put back together, we've changed the entire world for them, and you don't have to fix the entire problem to make a huge difference in somebody's life. You just got to be willing to step into the fray and see what you can get done.
Wow.
Ben, if somebody's listening right now and they feel like they're stuck, it might not be to the same extent as some of what you see. I don't know. Could you speak to them for just a moment as someone who's felt proverbially, or persistently stuck in your life and you see it all over the place? What would you tell a person like that?
Well, just because I've got these extreme examples doesn't mean I don't still have the regular, I feel stuck and stagnant, and my answer to that is it honestly works the same in both circumstances, extreme or mild. Dude, push yourself to do something uncomfortable. When we have these things that make us uncomfortable, like for me, it was podcasts for the longest time, public speaking, like it gets tremendous anxiety about it. But there's a reason. I think that, I don't know if God gives us that little bit of tension there for us to pay attention to, but what I've found over the last several years is that the more I lean into these things that make me uncomfortable, the more exposure and opportunity we get, So to anybody that's feeling stuck, like even if you're stuck in the gym, what do? You change the routine up. You throw in some exercise, you start pushing heavier weight. That same mantra applies to regular life. Just force yourself into uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable circumstances. I've heard it said many times, the comfort zone is where dreams go to die. And my life has 100% proved that, addiction for me was trying to change the way I felt. I wanted to be comfortable. And so now I'm doing the opposite of that. I'm trying to push myself in uncomfortable situations on purpose to teach myself to endure it, to deal with it. I think it was Marcus Aurelius says something along the lines of, if it's endurable, endure it. In other words, like, don't just sit there and bitch about it, man. Just deal with it. Like, get out there and do it, Yeah. It's a very long answer to your question.
No, it's a really good one. And we love the title of our podcast because I think what you just said is what resilience is at the end of the day. Yeah. Would you agree? Are there other dynamics to or other variables to how you would define resilience?
No, I think you can define resilience really simply as the ability to endure things for a higher purpose. You see the light at the end of the tunnel and you're going to push through it, man. You're going to push through whatever it is that you have to do today. And I've been in states of mind where simply getting out of bed was a monumental task for me to do, But the more you keep forcing yourself to do things that you don't want to do, like one day you look back and you realize, like, I just accomplished an obscene amount of things today. I don't even know how that's possible. Let's do more tomorrow.
Yeah. And Ben, maybe give us a specific, you don't have to obviously want to keep it, you can get as specific as you want to, but some of like the crazier stories and interactions that you've been in where you're getting out of your comfort zone. Like, what does that look like for you, whether it's rescuing people? Like, I'm sure you have a litany of.
Oh yeah, I got tons of them, but I think one of my favorite ones of forcing myself into a really uncomfortable situation was returning to the trap house. So for your listeners that don't know, a trap house is a house where narcotics and women are bought and sold. They're typically the sole source of suffering in any neighborhood where they exist. Okay. Jess and I made the decision to go back to the trap house that sat immediately adjacent to that empty lot I woke up in 2019. Now, that house is a house I have watched people die in. My buddy of mine got shot 6 times in that house. I've gone to jail in front of that house several times. And we made the decision to go back to that house just because we felt God was telling us to. And it was tied back to that promise we're going to go back for everybody left behind. We went back to that house and it had been 3 years at this point. So we were 3 years off the streets, 3 years clean. And it was like we never left. The same people were sitting in the same chairs, smoking the same shitty dope, hating their lives. And we made a second decision right then that we were going to come back and shut that house down. And so what that meant was going to the dope boy that ran the house and telling him, I'm going to shut your house down. And by the way, I want you to help me do it. Right. That's stepping outside your comfort zone. Now you can imagine how that went over. Right. Like, I'm going to take away your ability to make money. And so obviously I didn't quite say it that way. It took 6 months, but we did end up shutting that house down with his help. And we turned it into a several living house that we then used for what we call family reunifications. We had a trafficking survivor that had come to us straight from rehab. She had gone to rehab straight from jail. And 2 nights, so I guess it was about a week ago. My days are blurred. She picked up 2 years clean. She's got custody of her kids back. I mean, so that's a very extreme example of forcing myself into something uncomfortable. But if you look at the payoff on that, I think anybody would have done the same thing.
Yeah. Wow.
100%.
Wow. So Ben, speak to those two who, I think there's a handful of us, and I struggle with this at times, but when you're thinking about just, and this is a big idea, but kind of life's purpose, life's mission. Obviously, I think you've had some inflection points on how you've determined what yours is. But those people that, kind of like Mark had mentioned before, but how do you get yourself to kind of really hone in on what that is when you're stuck, so to speak?
So I think purpose for most human beings is going to be tied in some way to service of fellow human beings. I think we're just wired that way. And so what I would encourage people who are trying to figure out what their purpose is, I'm going to go right back to that forcing yourself to be uncomfortable thing. More specifically, though, not just uncomfortable. I'm talking about the things that like break your heart. Like when you're scrolling social media, everybody's got that thing that when you see it, you scroll faster. You don't want to deal with that today. You don't want to think about it. It could be, homeless animals. Like it doesn't have to be as extreme as what we're doing. But I think everybody has this little built-in thing that breaks their heart when they see it. And I have found personally, and with a lot of people we've worked with, when you intentionally lean into that thing that breaks your heart, when you move towards it instead of doing what comes natural to us, which is to flee from it, and you try to make a difference in it, just a small one at first. And you keep doing that. You keep trying to expose yourself to that thing you don't want to see or deal with.
Right.
What's going to happen is over time, you're going to become known for dealing with that thing. You're going to start meeting more people who are dealing with that thing. And next thing you know, you've raised a damn army and moved the needle on this thing that you used to not even be able to think about because it bothered you so deeply. That's the long answer. The short answer is, dude, just get out there and love on somebody. Like more will be revealed. You're going to figure out why you're on this earth if you just start getting out there and trying to help people out. And I really do firmly believe that. And my perspective might be skewed because we primarily work with the addicted population, but I can tell you, at least in the addicted population, that service work thing is huge. Then it also works pretty well with the veteran population.
Yeah. Ben, can we talk a little bit about, there's so much to talk about on the work front and the amazing work you're doing, but that moment you had with your daughter was really beautiful just a couple minutes ago. I'd love to touch on fatherhood and what it's meant to you, what you've learned about yourself. I think it's quite a reflective mirror at the end of the day. What have you learned about yourself through that process of fatherhood?
I've learned how to forgive myself. I've learned how to show myself grace. There's no handbook on parenting and none of us are going to ever be perfect, but as long as we're leading with love and we show up, particularly as men, as the provider, the protector, who can still be tender and loving and affectionate. Fatherhood's a huge deal. We could honestly do an entire podcast on this, and I'm going to tell you guys something that bothers me to my core. We've never worked a trafficking case of a girl that had a dad in the picture.
Wow.
We just haven't. You can get out there and study the outcomes for fatherless homes. And it doesn't mean they're all going to end up in a bad place. What I'm saying is that people that end up in a bad place often did not have a good father in the home. I think the importance of strong men in the American family, it's something that cannot be overstated. We are needed now more than ever, especially with all the insane things going on in the world right now. But yeah, like I exist to be a good dad. I love my kids, man. I always have, even in the middle of addiction. Like I was still trying to get out there and take them fishing, take them camping, take them hiking. My kids, I mean, they're my best friends, but not in that permissive kind of way that you see on social media. Sometimes you still got to be a dad. You still got to tell them. You got to steer them. Learn what's right and wrong. But kids will teach you a lot, man. They will teach you a lot.
No doubt.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit too about just marriage and your marriage to Jess, with the kind of in the midst of that too, like how that, how you guys lay the groundwork there. Cause clearly you're doing a good job at that. That was evident there in that little interaction. But I think that's such an important thing that a lot of us strive to want to do. And we know it's not easy, and it requires forgiveness of others and ourselves too.
Yeah. Well, obviously I mentioned my first marriage was destroyed due to my addiction and alcoholism. My relationship with my ex-wife is, I don't think it could possibly be any better. We talk daily. The kids are back and forth all the time. So I'm going to start this off by talking about, even when a marriage falls apart, dude, you got to put the kids first. If a junkie and his wife, who he ran off by being a junkie, can do that, I think anybody in America can say, okay, we're going to put the kids first. Even the crack kid did that, right? But on mine and Jess's marriage, I mean, dude, she's my best friend. And she has to come first in all things. She is my confidant. There are no secrets. We don't have, this is not a knock on anybody. We don't have separate finances. We don't have separate bank accounts. We never have. What's mine is hers, and what's hers is mine. We approach literally everything as a team. We have to have faith at the center of our marriage. God comes first, family second, and then the mission third. Now, I'll be the first to admit I blur that line sometimes. If you see me, I'm pretty heavy on the mission sometimes, but I have to remember at the end of the day, my marriage has to come first, or else everything else falls apart. I think man and wife are probably, strong marriages would be one of the biggest things we could do to drive this nation in the direction we all want to see it go. And that's the thing, like we have all this division and hate on social media. Everybody wants the same thing for this country. Based on what I'm seeing out there on the streets, strong father figures and mom and dad at the head of the household, leading the family, like traditional family values. That's how we fix this. That's how we fix a lot of the problems that I deal with every day. I am picking up the pieces of broken homes out there on these streets. That doesn't mean, I just told you my first marriage failed. So that doesn't mean like you can't have a failed marriage or a broken home and still have good outcomes. But I'm just saying overall, I think you get more strong men and strong marriages leading this country in a better direction. It'd be a whole lot easier for me to do what I'm trying to do out there.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. I think too often it's viewed as an impediment or something that's going to slow you down. And the experience of a marriage that is, I think, the grounded in faith and grounded in purpose, and ultimately built on trust is you're so right, Ben. It's
trust is paramount. You can't breach that. Without that, you have nothing. That is your currency in a marriage, is trust and respect. And
why do you think we're seeing so much deterioration of marriage in our society?
There's 1,000 reasons for it. Well, I could go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but it's really
hey, feel free, man. Mike is your. I love a good conspiracy theory. Ryan can tell it's right.
Oh yeah.
Any of the congressional reports on TikTok?
No.
Okay, so they've like, this isn't conspiracy theory. It's actually in congressional reports. The Chinese are studying things that get kids addicted to TikTok.
Yeah.
They're studying how much they're looking at the screen. And so they're pushing narratives on social media that I believe are fully intended to destroy the American family. And then again, from a congressional report, the Chinese Communist Party subsidizes Chinese companies who manufacture the precursor chemicals to fentanyl as long as they export it to Mexico. That's bizarre. Like why this is, and you can Google this. It is in a congressional report. That is not a conspiracy theory. So I think we have nation state actors that are actively working to wage unconventional warfare on a generation of Americans. And if you've looked at the overdose numbers and the divorce numbers, like, bro, it's working, right? It's working. They're winning a war without having to fire a shot. And then we, obviously, as Americans, we're letting this happen. And I'm guilty of it too. We'll give our kids devices, and the temptation to let a device, a tablet, a phone, whatever it is, babysit the kids so we can, work or do whatever it is we're doing. It's huge. It's an issue of convenience, but people aren't understanding the consequences that are tied to that convenience. Like, we're losing control of shaping our children's moral compass. And for all of human history, that has been the role of parents. We're supposed to protect, provide, and guide, right? We're supposed to get our children to adulthood and teach them the best way to live. And now we're not so much doing that last part. We protect and we provide, but that shaping their brain, I think, is getting left to the social media masses, which is dangerous.
Yeah. So, Ben, if you're talking to, especially, I would say, younger parents with younger kids, like, how would you coach them? Given what you said.
The biggest thing I would advise anybody to do, and this is not just me, one of the human trafficking cops that is real big on social media that we just worked with on the operation I was telling you guys about, says the exact same thing. The single biggest thing you can do to protect your kids from any sort of exploitation, bad actors, and I think it applies to preserving a family dynamic as well, is just simply have family dinner. Like, mandate that in your house. You have to have family dinner, no devices, mom, dad, kids, you got eye contact, you're having conversations. That single simple act can maintain a level of trust with your kids, especially as they approach adolescence, where they're going to be comfortable to come to you with things. They know they can talk to you because you're not buried in a phone. They're not buried in a phone. Just keep having family dinners. Yeah. Like, and that is a fixed, hard and fast rule in our household.
No doubt.
I remember it's so simple.
And it
is. It
is simple, not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, right? Yeah, it's not easy at times. I read this was years ago, but they did I think it was New York Times or Wall Street Journal, did a study of some of the 50 to 100 of the most influential people in the world. And the single thing that more people had in common than anything else was they grew up in a family that had family dinner.
100%.
And they felt listened to. The socioeconomic status was different, where they grew up was different. Everything was different, except they grew up in a home where the parents sat down and they took time to listen to those children speak. And they felt safe, they felt creative, they felt empowered, all of it, Ben. Man, I think that is such a good piece of advice.
And it's so simple. I mean, like, but Ryan, to dig more into your question to young parents, dude, pay attention to what your kids are doing online. Pay attention to what your kids are doing online. Man, I'm telling you, it is a scary, scary, scary world out there. And this isn't always going to look like, some dude tricking them on Roblox to get into a van marked free candy. You need to know who your who your kids are interacting with online. We won't let our kids or younger ones on any app that has a chat feature. Just because the prevalence of weirdos out there is so high. And they're not always nefarious. I mean, like, I've got some pretty funny examples of parents that have come to us that thought their kid was getting groomed and it ended up being like a special needs adult or something. But just be aware of what your kids are doing at all times,
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I mean, I think your point, and this isn't necessarily means it's every situation, but I think the fact that you've never had a trafficking case where, there's been a dad involved. I mean, I think it just goes back to, like, creating a family environment where it's a very strong launching pad for your kids. And I've failed countless times. I mean, Mark and I both have 3 young kids, and it's like, there's times I'm like, oh man, I definitely messed that up, or my reaction here and there. And I think there's an element where that's just that's human parenting.
That means you're doing your job as a dad. Like, we're not perfect,
Yeah. And I think there's an element of, like, going to my 7-year-old and saying, hey buddy, like, I was just a bad reaction. Like, I think that's important. And they mess up, they need to ask for forgiveness. But I think that creating the environment to be able to launch kids really well, I'd like to think puts them in a position to just increase the odds, let's say.
That's exactly right. And that's the best we can do. We can't control outcomes. We can do our best to shape them. And there's no better way to shape those odds than to have, the wholesome family moments that people like to make fun of because they're hokey and all. But dude, I'm telling you, that is the single biggest protecting factor you can offer your children in this sick world we live in right now.
No doubt. Ben, a little while ago, you just spoke on this idea of surrender, and it's a theme in my own life as well. But I want to hear your perspective on, you're doing some amazing work. Before we recorded, you just shared of the trip you came from most recently, just some amazing stuff as you think about how you operate today from a place of surrender and obedience, but what that means in terms of the intensity with which you move towards your goal. Can you just speak to that for a little bit? Like, what is that? Is there a tension there? Because I think when people hear surrender, they think like, oh, I'm waving the white flag, but it's different, of course, right? It's actually the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, you're really moving to the front lines. So what does that look like for you?
It begins with waving a white flag. All right.
Right.
I gave up and surrendered my own will. And that's waving a white flag. Now you got to be prepared to listen and go where you're sent and where you're called. I hear a lot of people talk about balance. That's a myth. There's no such thing as balance. Okay. You can get to a point where you feel like you're blocking off time for X, Y, and Z, but we live in a very dynamic world. If you have more than one kid, you're going to have a kid that needs more attention than the other kids during different seasons of their life. That right there dictates an imbalance. So don't be afraid of embracing imbalances. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because you mentioned our ops tempo. And I know I go way too hard a lot. I recognize that I've probably become addicted to our mission and just replaced one addiction with another. I recognize that. I know it. But you have to be prepared to go harder. And we're talking about resilience. You can't be resilient if you're not willing to go to the point of absolute exhaustion. Now, I'm not saying get to, physical or to where you're like physically sick, but you got to be willing to go really hard, especially in the entrepreneur space, man. If you are bringing in everything and you eat what you kill and nothing more, you got to be willing to keep going, dude. You got to be willing to push through being tired. You have to be willing to get up and do the hard things. And that can take a toll in every aspect of your life. You were talking about marriage. If you have a partner that is not of the same mindset and you're trying to just go, it's going to end badly. And so that surrender comes back into the picture again. You've got to be willing to surrender to what your marriage can withstand. You have to be willing to surrender your own wants, desires, and needs to what your kids need, because they've still got to come ahead of everything else. And basically, you've got to be able to adapt and flex on the fly depending on circumstances. So surrender can look very different depending on what we're engaged in. But never does it look like sitting on your laurels and resting.
No doubt.
Yeah.
What's next for you, Ben? Is it more of the same?
More of the same, but hopefully more focused. We're going to DC next week to meet with some folks at the White House, at the Pentagon, at the Cybercrime Center. And what I'm trying to do is get more allies in this fight, attempting to get more funding to this fight, because to date, everything we've done has been grassroots. We're raising it $10 to $100 at a time and then throwing in the shortfalls personally. I can't do that forever. I have 8 kids, we basically just adopted an Afghan that we're putting through college. We got her here during the collapse of Afghanistan, and she's now in medical school at Rhodes College in Memphis. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's always 80 different irons in the fire. I have no plans on slowing down anytime soon. We're working on renovating a 76,000 square foot abandoned hospital into West Tennessee's largest treatment facility. I'm only about $40 million shy of being able to do it. So I got a ways to go there, But, we're going to get Memphis, Tennessee off of America's Deadliest Cities list. And we're going to restore that city to what it used to be, which was a bastion of hope, of unity, of musical creativity, the arts. I mean, Memphis has a ton of amazing history. There's all sorts of cool stuff that's come out of that city, and the streets there are ready for this change. I'm not running into any street level pushback. Like everybody's ready to make it a better place. Then what I'm going to do is essentially package the how and go nationwide with it. Like I feel like what we've done there is something that can be replicated literally anywhere. And we've tested it on small scales. Like in San Francisco, we were able to go enlist the help of the streets to find a missing girl a few weeks back. And then a lot of what we did in the Afghan evacuation was really learning the methods that we're now using in Memphis. So I'm going to do my best to avoid shiny objects. Like I keep getting pulled into extraneous stuff. I'm going to try not to do that. I'm going to try to stay focused on Memphis until we hit that goal of getting it off the top 5 deadliest cities list. And then the other goal of opening that treatment center.
I just love the language that you use, Ben, too. And I think it's important for people to hear that. Like, I think I'm going to, right? I think you get caught up sometimes and like this, I hope that and I think it's important. Like, hey, look, I'm a full send on whatever this thing is. I'm a full send. And at the end of the day, like we're going to fail in some component along the way. And you know what? We're going to figure it out.
100%.
We're going to figure it out. That's inevitable. But I just think that it's so important. The language in which is used
I think
is
those
critical.
Failures are very important. Like that's how we learn and adapt and overcome. That's what makes us more resilient, right? Every failure it means nothing other than you tried. Okay. That's never a bad thing. So if at the very least you learn what to do different next time, it's still a win. Like we fail more often than we succeed. I'll tell you that right now. When we're trying to get people off the streets, I fail a whole lot more than I succeed. But you get to see a little girl come hug daddy, and daddy, wouldn't even be in the picture if it wasn't for something we did. That's worth it all. You don't have to have a lot of wins when your wins get visualized like that.
That's good.
It's really good. So Ben, when you're running the pace that you're running, which is very fast, I know faith is a very important thing for you, but what are the things that you do to stay grounded and sharp and engaged from that respect?
I'm an outdoors guy. I love nature. All of my kids love nature. We've got a river and a waterfall about a mile behind our house, and we'll go out and just get in the water. I love muscle cars. I've got a 68 Chevelle with 458 big block in it. I'm getting rid of the suspension in that. And then me and the kids go take the Chevelle for a spin and do donuts. We love to go fishing. But I'll be honest, like the work we do is kind of a hobby. It's pretty stressful and it exhausts me, but it fills me back up at the same time. Does that make any sense? Like I really do truly love what we do. If I could actually find a way to make a living doing it, I would just exit my business. But as of right now, the work just costs us, and that's okay because it keeps my gas tank full. That void that I used to try to fill with dope and alcohol, it stays filled with service today.
Yeah.
And so even though I got my little hobbies like hiking and playing in the water and stuff like that, like I really do truly love the work we get to do. And we involve the kids in it too. And they love it.
Yeah. It's special.
It's so interesting you say that, Ben, because you touched on having corporate jobs, and I mean you are and we're very talented, right? You were given all this opportunity. So much of I want to be this is going to come across as critical, but I'm just going to say it. Like I think a lot of folks end up in jobs that are comfortable, that pay the bills, that I have good medical insurance, but they don't feel any intrinsic motivation or purpose in that role itself. And so that strikes me as a trap. It strikes me a trap that's ultimately going to lead them to a place where they're not happy with, and I guess that's probably the definition of a midlife crisis.
Do
you see it? Okay. Am I off base there? And what does that mean for someone who's listening to this?
I think, and this isn't a knock on corporate America. Like I'm a capitalist, let's be real, but
sure.
Corporate America has created these comfortability traps. American society is so big on convenience and immediate gratification and feeling safe and not taking risks. And cush corporate job it checks all those boxes. But at what cost, fam? At what cost? We have really limited our potential as human beings if we accept that. Now, that's not to say that a corporate job isn't perfect for some people. Not everybody's meant to go out there and just take all these risks and do these things that entrepreneurs or a VC guy for sure is going to be doing. You know, some people are just wired for that. And then we got to have worker bees too. So, but I agree with you completely. I think corporate America is a comfortability trap, and it limits our human potential.
Like that.
So Ben, as we kind of bring things home here, how do people get more plugged in with the work that you're doing? I just think it's I love your local focus in Memphis, and then your broader vision to kind of go more national as things progress. And it's such a
So there's several ways. Yeah, it is very needed. I could not agree with that more. There's several ways to get involved. Since I'm a data guy, I've got like 15 ways to get involved right now until I figure out which one's working the best. And then I'll double down on that one. But we've got the 501c3s, We Fight Monsters. If somebody wants to just throw it on that, you can go to wefightmonsters.org/donate. Jess and I wrote a book. It's called We Fight Monsters. It's basically about our story up to this point. It's on our apparel website, which is onceamerican.com. The concept there is we're trying to get everybody back to all those ideals that were once American. Unity, working together, liberty, blah, blah, blah. You get it. Then we've also started the Owen Army. OwenArmy.com is where we are showing people exactly how we're doing this. We're blueprinting it out, and we're going to go around the country to different cities, helping people start up their own little mission sets to replicate what we're doing, and not necessarily in the exact same space either. We've had people do offshoots in a couple of different states that are focused on their own thing that breaks their heart, but the blueprint is essentially the same. You stand up a nonprofit, you've got for-profits that fund that nonprofit, you build alliances with local partners who are already doing work in the space, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, the biggest thing people can do to get involved, hit me up on social media, man. I'm everywhere. And I'm not hard to find. And if I don't answer, just find some of my comments, be like, hey, get back.
Yeah, it's so great. Are you guys doing much in Chicago?
We're not yet. We want to. We did some work off of is it Cicero Avenue, Cicero Street?
Yeah.
Okay. Back in 2023, we do want to get back to Chicago. Chicago, East St. Louis, Birmingham, and Detroit are on our short list.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Well, we'll plug that stuff. I think that's it's just a good way for people to get engaged in what you guys are doing. And one final question, unless Mark's got anything else to add, but so Ben, if you were to kind of rewind the clock before you had some of these epiphanies and kind of big turns for the better, so to speak, and you were to give Ben, advice 20 plus years ago, what would you say?
I'd keep my mouth shut. I'm dead serious. And the reason I say that is because I have come to realize today that I had to go through every bit of that to become who I am today. And I actually like the man in the mirror today. If I had even the slightest bit of the insight that I have today back then, I would have turned out to be something completely different. That doesn't mean I don't regret some of the things I've done. I mean, obviously I've got some very serious regrets and guilt and all of that, but knowing where I'm at today, I would not go back and change any of it.
Well,
now, if that feels like a cop-out and you want me to give you an answer.
No, I think it's well said. I think
then the one piece of advice I would have given myself back then, and I'll stand by this one, I would have told younger Ben to practice letting other people be wrong every day. That was an issue I had for a very long time, and it was probably one of the biggest life-changing things for me when somebody actually had me do that. Let other people be wrong.
Yeah.
It's good.
There's a lot of
answers, Ben.
Yeah.
I like both a lot. And the first one begs the question of like, this life is full of pain.
Yeah.
But if we view pain as, an opportunity as opposed to an attack, then like you said, you end up as a tool. That's a good word. You end up at a place where you like the version of yourself standing there in front of you. Yeah, it's good, Ben. It's really good.
So well said. Well, Ben, I know you're a busy man. You got to get back to your family here, and I know it's been a couple weeks for you with the journey. So we appreciate you carving out some time for us.
Yeah, guys, thank y'all so much.
Look forward to keeping in touch for sure. You guys are doing God's work.
It means the world, man. I appreciate y'all very much.
Yeah. All right, brother.
All right.
Thanks for taking time with us.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for engaging with this episode of the Masters of Resilience podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Stay up to date on all the latest episodes and get exclusive resources at mastersofresilience.com. We'll see you next time.